Hello everybody, welcome to this video clip. We are here in Limache in Chile, South America. It is now Monday, the 30th of April 2012. I'm sitting here with Howard Richards, a philosopher of social science who has a long life and has been thinking through how we can create a world that is more feasible for many decades. He has such a lot of knowledge and we would like to mine your head a bit. And today you wanted to talk to us a little bit about peace building in daily life.
Yes,
please.
Yes, that's what I want to try to give a perspective on. I think peace building in daily life is something everybody wants. Everybody wants to feel that what I'm doing is making peace and it has a meaning in the larger picture. And I want to suggest a framework for understanding how this can be true. In a way, it's sort of giving a theory to a point that Gandhi made when Gandhi said, well, work in your own neighborhood, and what you do in your own neighborhood is going to improve all the other neighborhoods in the world. Well, how could that possibly be true? Well, here's sort of the conceptual heart of it, that the modern world is governed by a basic cultural structure. That's a concept that Johanna Swanger and I developed in books, and especially my book, Letters from Quebec.
And also mention the social democracies.
Oh, yes. The Dilemmas of Social Democracy is one of the books with Johanna. And also the book with Catherine Hopper's, Rethinking Thinking, developed this idea.
Very important book.
So there's a basic cultural structure of the modern world. And this structure is the same in the interpersonal level, the national level, and the global level. And we can summarize it rather simply by saying that it comes from the basic principles of Roman law. Now that's sort of ignoring some important points, like Max Weber wrote his doctoral dissertation showing that many modern legal ideas don't exactly come from Roman law. They come from variants of it in the Middle Ages and so on and so forth. But so we're really talking about some very basic, simple ideas like property, like contract, like you and I relate by making a deal, a contract, and freedom. Freedom in the sense of, there are many senses of freedom, but freedom in the sense of you and I are independent juridical subjects. We don't know each other but anything. We're the latter-day descendants of the old paterfamilias, who was the total king of his little kingdom. And our sort of concept of personality and our concept of emancipation have been built around this idea of the independent subject. So this independent subject who makes deals, buying and selling, each with their own property, this is the basic cultural structure, and it operates in daily life, it operates on the national level, and it operates on the global level. In fact, one of the definitions given of globalization is that private law overrides public law. Public laws don't make much difference because they're only apply in one little nation. If capital doesn't like it, they can leave and go somewhere else. Capital flight to the race to the bottom, wherever wages are lower. A good example is Victoria's Secret. They make things in China where things are really very cheap. They pay taxes in some other country where the taxes are low because of the way they price things among their various subsidiaries. And then they sell things in the high-price markets of the world using a sort of British old-style image for the mystique of the product. Well, this is just typical of many, and that sort of illustrates the point that private law overrides public law. The sort of principles of private individualism, buying and selling, property owning, work everywhere. Okay, so this leads us into a problem where we have to change the logic of our actions. It's not enough to vote in some new government, because the government has to do what everyone else has to do. They have to do what the system requires. The system requires, and here's the point, it requires investor confidence. And one thing we sort of show in our books is that this requirement, what Ellen Wood calls a systemic imperative, that whatever else you do, you have to keep up investor confidence. The wonderful chapter 12 of Keynes' General Theory is about this. Whatever else you do, you have to keep up investor confidence. And that is a consequence of that basic cultural structure. It just, once you have that basic structure of the human being as juridical subject who buys and sells in markets, then when production comes to depend on sales, that is the reason you produce is you're going to sell it, then everything depends on the confidence of the investor who gets production started by investing. Without that, nothing else happens. Okay? Follow so far?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the beast, you call it also beast. And Emanuel Wallerstein said it somehow, as you said, it somehow takes the world system now. And a few people will remember that this is the Roman law in origin.
Yeah, it started, the European world system that Wallerstein describes becomes the global system. And he mentions, by the way, that one of the reasons why the European system became the world system and not the Chinese is that Roman law provided a logical framework for commerce which was superior to the sort of legal framework for commerce that the Chinese had. In fact, nowadays the Chinese are studying Latin, so they'll understand Roman law better. So what am I saying? I'm saying that it doesn't do any good just to elect a government because the government's subject to the same system everyone else is. And it doesn't do any good just to have a better theory. We can have the theory that we ought to have a mixed economy with lots of cooperatives and a good public sector, and we ought to have a gift economy, and we ought to revive indigenous ways of doing things. We ought to have a green economy. We ought to have an inclusive economy that includes everybody. We can have all these ideas about what it should be, but it's not actually going to happen until we get a handle on economic power. Now, there's an old-fashioned idea. It's not really going to happen until we take power away from one class and give it to another class. But we're saying it's something else. We're saying the world is run by rules, by norms, and nothing is going to happen until the norms change. When we change social norms, that changes something. When we kick out one person and throw out something else in the same institution, it doesn't change much of anything, even if that other person claims to have a different theory. So we can't do it just by changing theory. We can't do it by changing governments. We can do it by building other logics. And these other logics already exist. We're not talking about something that might exist. You know, Hazel Henderson is good on this. She shows that how most of the work that's done in the world, even today, is not done by the dominant logic. We have a dominant logic, which is everything happens for profit. Right? That's the mainspring that supposedly creates jobs, supposedly creates production, and supposedly creates a tax base so something to tax. It is certainly dominant, but it is not majority. It doesn't create the majority of employment. It doesn't create the majority of goods and services.
And even if it were more dominant, it wouldn't work.
Right, of course.
This is what you reminded me yesterday, you know.
Right. We have a Margaret Thatcher, for example, saying there is no alternative. We must lower wages and increase profits because that's the only possible way the system will work. So we have several decades of neoliberalism. We've been lowering wages and increasing profits, and it still doesn't work. So you could get a certain bang out of it. It's like a dope addict. You know, you give a subsidy to capital, they rush in, you know, they create jobs, they put in this new technology, and you say, wow, we've got to rush out of this. But it's an addiction. Like
the gambler who has a stroke of luck.
Then you have to keep giving more and more concessions to this sort of all-embracing, devouring monster of the logic of capital accumulation. Everything for profit. We say, well, we're going to sacrifice ecology, so the Amazon rainforest is lost. We have to sacrifice it. Why? Because there's no alternative. We have to do what's profitable. It's profitable to burn the rainforest to make hamburgers for McDonald's. There's money in it, so we got to do it. Or we can say we're going to have to break unions. Why? Well, because we have to do that to create a favorable investment climate. And investors don't like places with strong unions. We need a place with weak unions or no unions. So down go wages. So we sacrifice, you know, one thing after another to this dominant logic. So what do we do in daily life about this? We act by a different logic, right? And our claim is that, I say our because I have co-authors, our claim is...
I'm with you.
Oh, good. And one of my co-authors is Evelin. That as we build a world that depends less on the dominant logic, we're more able to resist the dominant logic. We're more able to say, for example, the city of Rosario, Argentina, had an offer from Jumbo, a big Chilean multinational. I don't know who owns Jumbo, but it's probably some even bigger multinational. Anyway, they offered to build a big store in Rosario and, in quotes, create 2,500 jobs. And what they wanted was exemption from taxes and exemption from any future taxes that might ever be imposed. And the city council of Rosario voted no, unanimously. They were able to say to Jumbo, we don't want to give you this tax break in return for creating the jobs. And why could Rosario do that? It's because Rosario is a city that has a great deal of what they call economía solidaria, solidarity economy. There are just all kinds of solidarity institutions in that particular city. They also have a municipal bank which promotes small business and micro business. And they all, if you want to start a little business in Rosario, the city bank will not only give you a loan, they'll do your payroll for you. They will fill out all your forms. That's one of the big problems with small businesses. They don't have time for all the paperwork. But in Rosario, Citibank will do it for you. So they have a plural economy where they're promoting all sorts of other things. So if they don't get those particular 2,500 jobs because it's not worth it to give in to capital in that ignominious surrender way, they have other options. So that's the basic idea. I want to tell about a study that was done of well, let me say, the question you want to ask me now is sort of give a daily life example,
right,
okay?
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
so everyone just asked me, give a daily life example. So here's an example. My brother loses his job, I take him in, he comes to live at my house, right? So that's living by a different logic, living by the logic of family solidarity, which is different from the logic of capital accumulation. And there's a study that was done quite some time ago, about 3 decades ago, comparing labor unions in Massachusetts and Argentina. And one thing they found was that the labor unions are much stronger in Argentina. And why? It's because in Argentina, if you go on strike and you don't have a paycheck, you can go live with your relatives. And you can't do that in Massachusetts. So this sort of difference in extended family versus lack of extended family makes a difference in terms of the power of workers to resist the demands of employers. I'm not against employers. Employers are great. I've been one myself. But I'm in favor of governability. You know, governability, and to get governability, we have to have a plural economy where more than one logic is working. And we can do that in daily life. Right?
What about small and big government?
Well, I think it's good, desirable to have a considerable public sector. I think there should be some sort of global authority, but I certainly believe in plurality. I think the important change we need to make is the transformation of civil society. It's not the government taking over everything. It's that civil society working by different rules. I think that's sort of the basis of the necessary transformation to get into a different logic. Now, when I say daily life, that's different for different people. I used to be a bankruptcy lawyer, and sometimes if I'm organizing in Chapter 11, we're talking about my daily life involves saving the jobs of all the people who work for the company. Right? Or if I'm a school teacher, I have 30 little souls in front of me in the classroom. My daily life involves how these little souls are going to grow up. So, or I've never been a public official, but if I were a public official, it would be part of my daily life to do things that affect the whole public. So I'm not talking just about what private people do in their own families. I am talking about that, but I'm also talking about whatever your role in society may be, what you do or what I do can affect the governing logic, because we can choose to follow a different logic. And this is not a new idea. There are lots of people following different logics all the time. Right.
And wherever I go in the world, people are more and more ashamed of following different logics. They feel, oh, you know, I'm naive, I'm idealistic, I'm not realistic. It gets this kind of label.
Yeah, idealism is the only realism. There is simply no realistic way that the human species can survive. There's no way the biosphere can survive driven by the dominant logic. So if you're not marching to the beat of a different drummer, you're marching to the destruction of the species. So if you're not idealistic, you're not realistic at this point in time.
Yeah, I agree so much with you.
So is that pretty clear?
Yes.
Can I say anything to make it clearer?
Some more small examples from daily life, perhaps.
being a conscious consumer, another point Gandhi made. Gandhi said that a humanistic consumer, when buying something, does not consider only the price. The humanistic consumer considers the working conditions of the people who produced that product. So you can, by buying green, by buying social, you can make a difference every time you go to the market and make a purchase. One thing we do here is we share things with the neighbors, and we have a lot of lemons. We give lemons to the neighbors. We don't buy and sell. We're just good neighbors. But it's not as though we're always giving, because someone knocks on the door and someone has a big bag of tomatoes for us. So it's reciprocal, and this has been going on for thousands of years. This reciprocal giving is a much older institution than the stock market, or than the concept of buying land and then hoping its price will go up and profiting from it. Reciprocity has been going on for a long time, and in principle it's stable. There are tribal peoples who for hundreds of years have had the people in the inland providing vegetables to the people on the coast, and the people on the coast providing fish. It's part of ritual, it's part of reciprocity, it's part of tradition, and it's perfectly stable. However, the money system is not stable. Because if you're in business, I remember one of my clients in bankruptcy saying to me, he said, Howard, if you can just get me out of this jam, I'm never going to be upside down again. And what did he mean by that? He meant, from now on, I will have more receivables than payables. That's being right set up. I will always be right set up. I will always have more receivables than payables. Well, as John Maynard Keynes emphasizes, one person's receivable is another person's payable. So when you add up all the receivables and payables, they have got to be equal. So it is not possible for everybody to have more receivables than payables. That simply can't happen. And it doesn't happen. The system is inherently unstable. That's one reason, as various historians have shown, historians and economists have shown, that's one reason Europe had to expand. Europe simply was an unstable system which could only attempt to stabilize itself by taking over the rest of the world, by taking over natural economies, in the language of Rosa Luxemburg. So these other logics, many of these other logics, have the potential to go on forever. They don't have an inherent instability. The dominant logic of today does have an inherent instability. However, that doesn't mean the dominant logic has to go to zero. One of the great achievements of the dominant logic, as Joseph Schumpeter and others point out, is that it does a lot of innovation. If we didn't have the technologies that have been developed by people who were in business for profit, we couldn't have the population of the earth we have today. So we get a lot of dynamism out of this sort of competitive urge to produce another iPod, another great invention. But what I'm saying is, or what we're saying is, we can have that dynamism. My friend, I have a friend, Luke, who's the head of the Institute for Social Science, European Social Science Institute in The Hague. He says, Howard, what your theory is, have your cake and eat it too. This is my have your cake and eat it too socialism. That we can have the dynamism, the invention, the creativeness of entrepreneurs who go out and do something new, who organize, and at the same time, that can be a governable system that doesn't get out of control, doesn't get out of hand, doesn't destroy the biosphere, and we can have inclusion because we have more than one logic. There's a logic that serves for creative dynamism of entrepreneurs. There's another logic that serves for including everybody, and we can make them work together. And one key to making them work together is to siphon off unearned income, excess profits and rents from natural resources. Siphon that, this is called Ricardian rents. Siphon that off and throw it into the social sector. That's what we're doing in South Africa now. That is, we have people who are been unemployed for many years and now they're working. What are they doing? They're taking care of victims of AIDS. That's one of the biggest things they do. They cook for them, they change their bandages, and they're paid by the government. How does the government pay them? Because it gets money from gold. South Africa is a country with natural resources, and it doesn't cut down production to siphon that money off and throw it into the social sector and create inclusiveness and employment. So we can put these things together. And we can do it by actually doing it in daily life. Everybody, wherever anybody is, anybody can do something to get out of the lockstep of maximizing profit at all costs, creating a favorable climate for investors who want to maximize profit at all costs by having a more than one objective.
Yes.
You know, you asked me to make a tape on Pierre Calam. I don't know if we'll ever have time to.
Yes, please, the next one then.
Okay, but
so we round up now. Yes, but perhaps. Yes.
I'll give one idea from Pierre Calam and then we'll close. Pierre Calam says, in the future, we must develop organizations that are able to pursue multiple objectives at once.
Mm.
Okay.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you very much.